Hey, this is Brent with Lykins Motorsports. Um, there's a YouTube channel, Drag Boss Garage. Uh, my buddy Tim Halstead runs that channel. Puts up a lot of Cleveland material. He recently became owner of an engine that I built, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. Probably closer to 5, I think, as a dyno mule. I do quite a few dyno mules just because that's the easiest way for me to learn new things and not put a customer's engine at risk. Um, and it's taught me a lot of different things, piston ring selections, camshaft stuff, cylinder head flow, that sort of thing. So it's been pretty valuable. I've done just recently the 311 cubic inch Windsor. The 352 would be one that you guys all would recognize. I've done a 390 with a really high RPM hydraulic roller cam. And then I've done this Cleveland. And Tim's featuring this. He recently, well, let's just back up. After I had it as a dyno mule, I sold it to a previous customer of mine who had bought a Fox body Mustang that he owned back in high school. So he was going to put this engine back in that car. That project never came to fruition, so it sat for several years. And then my customer sold it to Tim. So a lot of the things that I did on that engine, this was way before my YouTube channel. You can still find the dyno video on my channel, but as far as engine assembly goes, there's no video to be found. So, but I do have a lot of pictures. So I thought what I would do would be just to talk through the various components and different aspects of the engine build and show some assembly photos, as well as when I brought it home from the dyno, I pulled the oil pan and checked some bearings, and just because I was trying some different things, and you'll see the results of that. But I'm going to put up some pictures, and then we will get around to doing some narration. Alright, so on this engine build, we tried a couple of different things. The goal was to just build a stock stroke, stock headed 4-barrel 351 Cleveland and test out some cams and test out some different rod lengths than what we usually use. So the foundation of the build was obviously the engine block. This was just a factory 351 Cleveland block. It was found at a standard bore. When I sonic tested it, the walls were pretty thin. That's kind of what Clevelands do right off the bat. They're not known for thick cylinder walls. Ford never really got it together. As far as the Windsors had thick cylinders and weak mains, and the Clevelands had strong mains and thin cylinders. I don't know. That's just what Ford did. But this was just a factory block, standard bore. We sonic tested it, and it was pretty thin. I can't remember exactly what the sonic test results were, but I'm thinking there was a cylinder or two that were at 80 or 90 thousandths wall thickness at standard bore. So the block was taken to a 10 over just to clean everything up, and then we line honed it and squared the decks, and I'm pretty sure we ended up at a 2190 deck height. So a 9200 is standard for a Cleveland, and we just did a cleanup cut. Generally they're a little bit taller than 9200, like 9205 or something like that. So we just did a cleanup cut, made sure the decks were square and flat and parallel to crankshaft centerline, and then rolled on with it. Before all of that, I used some hard block, and we did a half fill to the bottom of the water pump holes, and that's to stabilize those cylinders that were a little bit thin and a little bit weaker. There's different oiling mods that you can do to the Cleveland. The biggest thing that's beneficial to the Cleveland, if you're wanting to turn some RPMs and keep everything in the block, is lifter bore bushings. So we put in all 16 bronze lifter bore bushings, and the way that big block Fords and Cleveland's oil, the main oil gallery hits the lifter bore first before it travels down to the mains. So if you can restrict the oil going to the lifters, you're in a lot better shape. You can also, there's a big honking hole in the number 1 main saddle, and you can tap that for a 1/4-inch pipe plug. And Tim Meyer makes some cam bearings. They're just Durabond cam bearings, but he puts a groove on the back side of them, and that helps to restrict oil going to the cam as well. So it's quicker and easier for me to buy those from Tim than to do them myself. So I buy them from Tim. But trying to remember, I think that's pretty much it for the block. We used ARP fasteners as always. Fel Pro rear main seal. The bearings, I can't remember exactly what the bearings were. From the pictures that I have, the mains were uncoated and the rod bearings were coated. So whatever brand they were, that's how we ended up doing those. The crankshaft was a super light stock stroke Cleveland mains, so you can run those in a Cleveland block or in a 2750 main Windsor block, like the new aftermarket blocks. It has small block Chevrolet rod journals on it. So we used a Molnar 6400 length rod, and that is not typically a rod length that guys usually reach for. You see a lot of 6-inch stuff with the Clevelands, maybe a 6 1/8. With the Windsors, we go 6200, 6250. So to use a 6400 length rod was something I had never done before. It makes the piston incredibly short and makes the piston incredibly light, even with a little bit of dome to it. So if you do the math at 9,190 minus inch 750 for half of your stroke, and then minus 6,400 on rod length, I think the piston compression height comes out to be an inch 040. So getting down there pretty far. My 311 Windsor dyno mule was 990 on the compression height. So sometimes we try some things that are outside the box a little bit, and it works, and that gives you information and things to try later on down the road. So Scat super light crank, Molnar 6400 length rods. Race Tech made the pistons for me. They had vertical gas ports, and obviously were cut for a 927 wrist pin for a small block Chevrolet. A little bit of a dome, so I can't remember the exact compression ratio. I'm thinking it was between 11.5 and 12 to 1, somewhere around there. We ran race gas in it. We had Mahle 1mm, 1mm, 2mm rings. I think that's about it for the rotating assembly. So, as I mentioned before, this engine was built for testing some cams, and I got a cam from Straub Technologies. He sent me a custom solid roller to try, and then I tried one of my own solid roller grinds. Pretty healthy cam for a stock stroke Cleveland. The lifters were Morel lifters, if I remember correctly. Used an electric water pump and your typical harmonic balancer setup with an MSD distributor. The heads were just regular factory 4-barrel castings. I can't remember where I got them. We baked and tumbled those, put in bronze valve guides, did a valve job, and used some Ferrea 11/32 valves. The valve job was altered quite a bit. So the heads, here's some flow numbers for the cylinder heads. They are a little higher than what you would typically see out of a factory 4-barrel head. I would attribute that to the valve job and some things that we did with that. The heads had not been ported whatsoever. Didn't touch them as far as that is concerned on the intake side or the exhaust side. The valve springs and everything, if I remember correctly, is a packed small diameter spring with some titanium retainers. Use just a regular guide plate rocker stud setup, and we use some Crowler steel rocker arms. The intake was a strip dominator, untouched, and then I had Scott Perkins of SP Carburetors to build me a custom Holley Dominator. And it started life as a 1050 CFM Dominator. Lots of tricks inside that carburetor. We knocked the CFM down a little bit, but picked up some good stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We tried 2 different camshafts, and like I said before, I had a 2-piece timing cover set up. So I took the engine to the dyno. We made pulls on it all morning long with Chris Straub's camshaft, and then we went to lunch and came back and let the engine cool down at lunchtime. The 2-piece timing cover made things really easily. You just pull the water pump off, pull the separate plate off for the timing cover. I was able to just pull if I'm trying to remembering right, I think I removed the rocker arms, the push rods, and I used some coat hanger to reach down the push rod tubes and pick the lifters up out of the bores. So that allowed me to do a cam swap without having to pull the intake manifold, the carburetor, and all that stuff. Slide cam out, put the new one in, timing set, button it all back up, and hit it again. The difference between the 2 cams was pretty substantial. Pretty close on the torque, but I think I'll show you the dyno. Sorry, phone's ringing. Pretty close on the torque, but I think the horsepower was up almost 30 horsepower, and the peak was within 200-250 RPM of each other. Average horsepower also went up about 10 horsepower. So just a very stout little Cleveland with not a lot of fancy work done to it, just some things put together to try some cams, to try some different rod lengths. A lot of torque out of that little motor, I think, because of the rod length. But 615 horsepower at 8,000 RPM. I think towards the end, after we tried to do an apples to apples comparison the same carburetor and the way that everything was set up between the two cams. And I think after we were done, I pulled the air hood down over the carburetor so that the carb could get a nice dose of cold, fresh air, and we picked up another 5. So I think we ended up with about 620 horsepower towards the end. So after the engine come off the dyno, my friend, previous customer, wanted to buy the engine, so pulled. It had a Milodon front sump pan on it, and changed the oil pan to a Fox body pan. And while the pan was off, I went ahead and checked some bearings, and the bearings just look phenomenal. Anytime that you can see your bore mic tracks on the bearings after you've flogged an engine, then you know everything is going pretty smoothly. So yeah, here's the pictures of the bearings. Everything looked good. Also changed the strip dominator intake to a torquer, and I think we put a mechanical water pump on it instead of an electric water pump. But Brian had it for several years, never got around to using it, and Tim got a hold of it, and he's trying some different things with it. So I saw on the recent video this morning, he picked up a strip dominator. He's going to try to port it. Just as I know this may sound a little fishy coming from right now, but I would not expect this engine to make the same horsepower that it did 5 years ago. So different oil pans change different things, different intakes, obviously, different carburetors especially. So we've seen 20 and 30 horsepower between two similar carburetors before. So is it going to make 615 horsepower after Tim dynos it? I don't know. I also know that it's not good for engines to sit around. So those little thin rings can take a set to the cylinder wall, and then you lose a little bit of ring seal. But with all that being said, it's still going to be a stout motor. A Cleveland is the best engine that Ford ever made, in my opinion. I wished I could do more of them. Not a lot of orders for factory block Clevelands. Haven't had one in a long time. Have done some CHI headed stuff, but haven't got any orders for some Clevelands in quite a while. But the cylinder head design is phenomenal, and the little engines just want to scream and keep going. So one of the most successful engines that Ford made, in my opinion. All right, so I hope that gives you a little background on that engine. I thought it'd be a good thing since I saw Tim pop up some videos of it here recently to show what went into the design and the forethought and the building of that engine, to show some pictures and show some different things of how it went together. So wish the best of luck to Tim. I'm sure that will be a stout little motor for his wife's car. And Tim, if you need anything from me, feel free to give me a yell. I'll help you out. If you guys haven't subscribed, please do that so that you don't miss out on any of the cool Ford engine stuff coming through the shop. I've got FEs all around me. I've got I think 15 FEs to do and a couple small blocks mixed in there, so you don't want to miss out on any of that stuff. We got some more tunnel port stuff, FE and 302 coming up, and some race motors and some really cool stuff. So subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of that. Hope you guys are having an excellent Friday, and hope you have a wonderful weekend. Take care.